Hello, humanity. I have the human species body, visual bodies plan. Yep. In other words, as you, I've contemplated this for the human species body of individual bodies, all group different slash S. Countries A through Z are supposed to recognize and understand things that our founders' communications were changed. And there are self-value roles where otherwise that body is sensed. And where there are for this, if we offensively appreciate those things, the same people that want us to appreciate those things, they'll offensively, force and trick, hurt, persuade at locations or digitally. Things to go before courts that already have roles with digital crime acts and methods. Collusions with all sides of cases at the same time as themselves putting the same sequence shifts and the news at the same time. Overt criminal enterprise, private ones. That fentanyl, not using other people's reporting. But I mean, they keep reporting it in the news, Fox News, NBC, hello to. We're seeing clips of people, how dangerous it is. That's just one drug law. And the countering bodies are roles with all kinds of innocence crimes and crimes of database, predicate acts with facts. And these are people speaking on crimes and countering them. The only ones allowed to, as predicate acts with facts roles, as identity theft, fraud, slanders, all tactically delusions raw. How many natures of organized crime type are additionally from the medicines crimes people at Hartford Hospital have, with a whole bunch of people tied to a Falal family and a Demora family with Kevin Dillon, and people further with child abusers, leaders, and kids years apart. People with the name Kerr and Officer Jerry Miller, also recorded, confessed, and demonstrated, confirmed. More child offenders with the principal child abuser school, but this guy recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. He'd been planting evidence all sides of my house. They have a whole bunch of different countries and how our countries are shared here and there. These are a whole bunch of different judges, a different nature, and prosecutors, different people that work with different positions of courts with the same house, and one's connected to them. Involved police forging and switching names. They faked conversations with me. I weren't at all. I was at the police station when I was a kid and I was an adult. The kids who did go down there and speak to them, they put them in. They forced them to put fake things. They lie then and now worse about their affidavits they gave. And in other words, they put me. I didn't even know who the Chris Walters was. Increasingly, his family members, they're trying to plant fake exceptions, including with people increasingly with the FBI, former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, has the rules of predicate acts with facts at and next to all the campuses I went with connections with those names made by others, but made by themselves too. They'll tell you. We have to ask them correctly. I minded my business, so I could observe the connections between them, intercities too. And they brought the principal child abusers campus to me, and all kinds of things I recorded, and you guys pretended others recorded, including digitally, including with the Facebook page of the principal upskirt nature, other digital crimes with Joshua Julian is one of the ones recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with people through time with whiting forensics in Connecticut and their roles with state police families, interstates, and internationally with the same house /S, involved with a whole bunch of people tied to them with predicate acts with facts and on all sides of our houses. It's a method, and next to parks, they've been planting evidences. They have federal evidences crimes that have something to do with narratives where they pretended other too at the same time with people on the sides of the park, of Millwoods Park, and of where the community center is, the sides of the community center, as people involved with putting predicate acts and facts in databases at campuses too, with collusions with people from off campuses increasingly hyper. Additionally, the campuses haven't been used. Right where our America's founders, our words are replaced. So I can't offer that. I don't know if it's legal for me to offer it to other countries, but so I could offer it to President Trump, and partially nature itself is forcing that proper thing to do because, in other words, not one individual leader is not being forced to entertain, like economics people trying to speak for practical reason, use Immanuel Kant's phrase. In other words, we are all systems criminally poor and influence tactically delusions raw. We're needing to get water out of bottles for the legitimate reasons are being used as screen. In other words, we left out our problems is the communications are replaced. They did not have free speech. That's one of the things they communicated. That's one of the things that reality itself communicates when we pay attention to what laws were entrenched. But they are incapable of having that appreciated and of defending their takes on American history and on history as is. This is principle to understand how George Washington agreed to help our founders plural and to use their plan. And they asked us to refer to themselves plural as James Madison singular. And that's before he was a president. And obviously, George Washington had no choice but to use their plan, willingly or not. Everyone was fact worse than extorted, but no one allows the extortion of George Washington to be honest about it. And when they're pretending other, you guys are valuing currently foreign influenced, tactically delusions, raw, fact, nature, quality aspects of nature. Having been at campuses A through Z, or what's your research? You guys, that's my research. Our founders used James Madison's plan. It wasn't because of tea tax, the slavery entrenched northern colonies, southern colonies. You guys want to speak about racism, you guys bring up the N-word dishonestly. S-collusion/S. If you want to be honest about the N-word, but you don't care. We have black people's rights of life. You'll fake and change what we say about it. A through Z. You guys are collusion with a breaching method. It has nothing to do with that. You guys are a human species body of individual bodies. Now with all group differences generated by a breaching method, and you guys rolls with it. Not by what's showing us his body with it. The body that has other species bodies. Showing us it's not us nor them, but it's all things anyway. And that's how we can discern that fish have two eyes, distinctly from humanity's two eyes, but non-distinctly too. And simultaneously, but also per distinct identity of simultaneously, that is not us nor them, but it is all things anyway. In many prey, vaccines. This is asking to be led by the hyper-invisible but still discernible. As it is hyper-conjunction to all invisible but still discernible, as the parts of speech, not just of English. English has this, though, manifest with where and how we pay attention, how there is a hyper-possession over any subject we could deal with individually grouped together. There's the same hyper-invisible but still discernible that has us needing to appreciate more than one word for a verb. Because everything's about the discernment of that identity of value/value progression. That is all space nature, space/existence. As a distinct identity of hyper-invisible but still discernible. Its body is being discerned where a present participle, past participle. These are names hyper-additional for a verb. Present and past. See, the participle nature is the identity of the verb. But every verb is a nature where how, like for example, a cell of your body, a cell on the tip of the nail of your finger. It is your identity. But it also has a semi-nature relationship to your complete identity, which is simultaneously greater than it and more finite than it. But while as it anyway. And this is how we are shown. This is true to all parts of itself. Even if we make anything up, it is this volume science distinctly from the finite, the order of the finite, the active, or the grouped, and the progressive. But where and how it's showing us the value of seasons only increasing, even if they never get here, but only increasing here now, ones that aren't even here. It is showing us that we know an extent of the past that is true always. We know an extent that is of active truths now, truth/truths now being generated. Again, though, we have been separated from what we know about this, from our appreciation of this. We have been systems tactical ulterior from that one that is hyper native pure and that is hyper invisible, distinctly, but still discernible, distinctly from the parts of speech as the invisible but still discernible. For example, that which we could know and understand. Like, how do we know that there is oxygen and there are carbon gases? And note also with the cell body, cell nuclear, cell wall /S, and what is coming through this, the body of life, the body of the identities, volume science /hypervolume science, and discern how it is appreciating gases in their mixture and waters in their mixture, positive or negative to the cell /S of the plant life, the human life. Vaccines. They teach us things. In other words, what makes us no sound but shush. Boxing. Boxing, martial arts, and wrestling are about fighting by the rules. But the rules have been abridged since them ancient times. So the function by this, its role with revealing evolution's fruits, gifts, and means out of nowhere. I'll donate President Trump. I keep forgetting, it's too long. I'll donate pantheism, hyper counter tactically. And because everyone needs to learn, because everyone had other taught to them about how and why really we're running around all hunger and thirst through systems tactically ulterior from the one from one that's not criminally foreign influenced. The science has been criminally foreign influenced from off their locations. There are proofs it came from off their locations, and then forced hyper additional collusions at the science's locations, and that is increasing the identity relationship to itself as ourselves, but as our identity relationship to itself, that it is not an appreciation of a special difference relative to the identity of all space such existence and Earth's a special difference. So it is forced from here, not as death, as lethal Hades, because death comes to everyone. Lethal Hades is forced space nature transfer, where our identity is nature. Where nature is another word for identity. I'm using it as another word for identity because both nature and identity have relativity to positive and negative simultaneously for the same reasons that values do. This value/value progression we are as a quality of diffusion, as life, humanity, as freedom, and as free speech abridged. Debate about the N word, for example, used to measure and maintain self-value roles, blaming and having blamed other things, others, or selves. Where, how, and why. We have black pupils, whites of eyes, and that was separated from these conversations and from these subjects that it is inseparable from. And then further, where and how the breaching method assigned other to be communicated by nature when nature is not criminal insidiousness and rolls with that, where forced, tricked, hurt, persuaded, only remember having been sustained. Because, two, as sophistication more and more, coming out of the degradation of sophistication to invent itself through the breaching method. So the breaching method knew that nature itself would show us one of the things that is true always, that those crazy laws were about before America's founders were born, was about human fact, human nature breaching method. It wasn't just slavery. Northern colonies and southern colonies too, with black, sickly distinctly. Fact, human nature tortured, extorted, and enslaved by the breaching method. That sickly distinctly hurt white people and to enslave them too. I'm not talking about the way it did to our founders. They're about to bring that to their sophistication away from them too. But in other words, James Madison's plan was to force I don't know if it was 13 at key locations, people to have to break the rules of the torture, extortion, slavery method rules, or everyone's and pretending to have free speech to an extent. Otherwise, that body would be censored and that would be accounted for. In other words, including if that body was a majority of people, including if it was everybody, whole colony. The whole colonies were divided. The companies, the country, and Native Americans. We have to discern Native Americans against Native Americans before because it was already a breaching method before 1492 is more probable and scientific and demonstrably that before 1492 already a human fact, human nature, hyper-foreign, hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise method, singular, had forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded, had destroyed ancient memory at countries A through Z, at America too. How come when they say, oh, well, that's not what our recorded evidence is saying, how come we don't address how the evidences were? They had roles with criminally foreign influence databases. They had roles with torture, extortion, slavery. They had roles pretending other two simultaneously while being used remotely, doing that. And increasingly screening too. The quality, fact, human nature necessary to attend to the breaching method. That again, nature itself shows us is one of the things true always. Those laws were about. Slavery was about a human fact, human nature breaching method. 3 ways manifested: torture, extortion, slavery method. As systems, tactical terror from nature's where it is not nature, only as criminal insidiousness. Natural law is real. Or have you even read St. Augustine or whatever? In other words, I forgot it. Ooh. In other words, black people's white survives. There's relativity. Relativity is real. Way more than reasons than just this. They've been using, while being used remotely, people with phrases like theory of relativity. Theory. People are using theory while criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions, rot, syntax as the names of the people of the sciences. But there are other names involved with this. And there are other motivations than they pretend, even when they have real ones. Like they're the only ones that know about things because of nuclear and all the things, like even peaceful energy generation. It is critical to understand how and why we were forced onto the same. It's not just a native. We are a hyper-native system. And Native Americans increasingly are not allowed the identity of the grounds, the identity of relationship to itself, and the free speech necessary to defend the Constitution unabridged. The same distinctly from, but also non-distinctly from how the branches of government themselves and the intelligence tied to them which never was never not hyper criminally foreign influence. That's where the criminal foreign influences came from. Stayed like that. The ancients, there are proofs they couldn't fathom how anyone could force, trick, hurt, persuade anyone to look away from how nature communicates, what it communicates, how to cause evolution's fruits, gifts, means out of nowhere, how to respond to things like wars, not leaving out the breaching method that demonstrably still has our republic self-valued, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw with its campuses systems, the campus Marcius. Since semi-ancient times, there has been criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought from off its campuses, incapable of affording to defend more and more at its campuses or anywhere else. Short words properly with theory, let alone convictions, by the identity the sciences share. Therefore, the names of the people of sciences, they share it. And they have failed it because they have left out black people's whites of eye. Because the human species body of individual body shares it. Also with completely different species, individual bodies with group differences too. But they don't have criminal foreign influences. They are in a system together, individuals and grouped. Even when fighting with each other, all agreeing their systems other, that's normal. Suits and ties, counters, exceptions, collusions with nature and debate, contains quality aspects of nature clearer than day, being and having been used remotely, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions draw. It's why how it is manifest at the sides of next to places, in our corners of the streets, and next to news locations. And with the difference of them guilt with that, with predicate acts with facts. And with that, with the identity different, then the differences bracket. So therefore identity. The only reason difference is shown greater than identity here is because its difference is being shown to us. But increasingly, nature's demonstrations were and are employed. Blamed on other things, others ourselves. It roles needs, natures, and styles of collusion /S with that. And or sensing for the breaching method. Anybody who's not collusion /S with that, including if that body is a majority of people, including if it is every one of a country together. Any grouping of countries to counter too. As long as their locations, areas, of states, countering exactly the way the breaching method wants and needs. For example, leaving out how we have black people's white rights, bringing up the slavery that it employed, leaving it out too. And leaving out what our founders communicated all about that and about the breaching method. Our founders communicated their speech is distinct from what they communicated because everyone's speech was measured through everyone else who would have been in trouble if they weren't measuring each other for the breaching method. That's all anyone was and is capable of doing. That's why for example, we need a who disbelieves act too. I will clean things up real quick. Like who disbelieves that the suburbs are tactically denatured to cause negative value nature progression acts in nature and to force people to self-value rules of criminally insane. The only means to cause positive value nature progression acts in nature is more and more to self-value rules of criminal, not just criminally foreign influence, criminal insidious natures of positive means to cause positive value nature progression acts in nature. The hyper criminally foreign influence ones. In other words, there's a possession. We're supposed to understand that there's problems at straits because while there's shipping and trade and things like that, half of that trade is still criminally foreign influence, like psychiatry, right? Where they're the only counters to crazy drugs that are killing kids and people. They're probably faking the people doing drugs. They do that. whole bunch of people at Harvard Hospital involved with people with the name Color, and patients too, and their doctors, people tied to the Color and Smith, and people that live near me with the Wethersfield police. Now they're playing games. They're refusing to get on paper. And they've been faking and changing that digital evidences with multiple police departments involved with the same house/S, personally and professionally. Also, the court's doing that through time. They've been stacking predicate extra facts in databases. They're only capable of doing it A through Z. Forgiveness is not to give up. Forgiveness is to not leave out the breaching method. Who disbelieves that the cities are tactically, in other words, even if they debate the suburbs were designed before America's founders were born. The colonists wanted to build better and safer, wider, a different identity relationship to the ground, its identity relationship to itself, water. You think, oh, they really cared about things like that while they had everyone with slavery? It was to measure everyone from abroad through themselves and through and then that itself individually grouped in together, used remotely, could be easier to extort and torture. A country is not even a real person. It just has to be treated as such by locations, areas, and states. We're in a semi-ancient trap that has, inverted all systems, that has separated all systems from one that will only demonstrate negative value nature progressions, acts of nature. In other words, there are answers. Part of the reason that, so now there are natures of industries, and there are mass millions of people on buildings and identity relationship to the ground, but no one can make food and water. And this is important too, because nature demonstrates more than that with that. Oh, what's your research? The research locations are criminally poor and influenced. Tactically delusions wrong. Polling locations. They have complete possession over the sense and sensibilities of whoever will try to rise above locations, areas, and states. They have already had self-valued roles with replacing James Madison's communications with us and as a founder. And the founders plural communicate for us to refer to themselves as James Madison singular. And then they went and got George Washington to agree to help them. George Washington couldn't help them alone to counter the internationally monitored conversations that had roles with slavery sickly, distinctly entrenched right through different countries still, northern colonies and southern colonies. Measures and maintains that left out. Pretend blame. And this breaching method shows how everyone how to pass off the blame. And then blame on the kids they didn't read. God help the ones who read. Oh, we got help, we got paid. Yeah, you guys have the employment, you guys, those influences by the breaching method. It measured and maintained what our founder said, distinct from what they communicated, better than we did. And it stole their communications from us. It has self-valued roles with that. Otherwise, that body is sensed. Vaccines. That's just things, but long. So, nature is showing us it. Any threshold country with nuclear weapons. That's where, and Palestine is right where we should put down a human species body of individual bodies plan. And we could force Israel to debate. Because anyone with suburbs entertained, people are dishonest about what they think about things too. And when the way they're questioned, in other words, everyone would change, would not be though, if it was framed correctly, if everyone hadn't been lied to. Connecticut's WFSB News, Fox Connecticut News, and WTNH. They have roles with various courts and names next to the state judicial branch offices and corrections officers that are increasingly involved with predicate acts with facts at campuses and with proven child abusers, leaders of the kids. And that whiting forensics is increasingly involved. Facebook is involved with the Joshua Julian and others, like with the name Chloe and Joshua Julian, Anthony Yagman on YouTube too. The FBI is trying to influence has influenced the online and the forensics names, etc. The lawyers, all kinds of scams, tactical delusions, raw, criminally foreign influence, readings of statutes, and precedents of reality. Especially with psychiatry, supposed to be experts on reason. You guys have criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions, raw principles, treatments of principles with American history. You don't leave out how we have black. They interbranch, use their differences, and use other people's differences to keep blaming on other things others sell. Little fake punks putting fake transcripts. A whole bunch of people at Harper Hospital with the name Leahy and Lombardo involved with some untimely deaths and child offenders, digital, sexual, medical, including with judges and prosecutors. Judge Killian putting fake things in databases, their delusions, sequence shifts with them. They're refusing to get on paper, and they're hiding what I caught them doing before the World Trade Center attack. They're also leaking with this increasingly while they're refusing to identify themselves legitimately. The police who confess and rolls with this, police forums, including a Phil Cole, PHIL, involved with a Bob Chase, with whiting forensics, and with Police Chief Cintron, and 1 year ago involved with 80 Carrollsville Drive, also with their intimate ties, and people associated with the bakeries, Amato Zaccara Bakery and Modern Pastry, a whole bunch of people tied to Jonathan Mayano, involved with them and his neighbors, involved with mayors in other countries, and overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and their educators. Like identity theft, fraud, slingers. I never had a class with John Mayano. They made one exception with a cooking class. Increasingly, nice girl. They lied about her. They lied about me to her, and they lied about themselves to her at New Britain Superior Court and at my high school. In other words, increasingly people from Washington, D.C. and the World Trade Center are involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, making fake exceptions. People I never had classes with, never saw around, like a Joshua Julian, planting evidences with the ones from other areas like Jonathan Mayano, involved with sequence shifts and other federal evidences crimes with a Ray Cologne, a whole bunch of people from other areas planted evidence on my street with them from other areas like a John Mayano, involved with multiple police departments. In other words, with identity theft, fraud, slanders, refusing to get on paper, putting fake things in databases. These are people they need to get out of the schools too. In other words, Alex Mayano, John Mayano. These are people with the businesses and houses next to Harper Hospital, involved with all kinds of natures of organized crime, identity theft, fraud, slanders, though, with the police, with the wire crimes and mail crimes. These were wire crimes and mail crimes increasingly with people with the name O'Brien and Cologne involved with the falsified police reports, and the courts starting fights between people too, putting fake ties, fake nature ties to them, fake motivations of it. Increasingly people with Walters too, further involved with hiding things and pretending to passion has something to do with a wedding I was invited to make a fake ties, fake natures ties to me. I only know that Chris Walters seeking me out to make confessions about how people were abusing him, making him get more and more roles with federal evidences crimes, various natures of organized crimes, and roles with other countries, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and names next to Harvard Hospital involved with the intelligence, criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions, raw. Also intercities next to the campuses, putting identity theft, fraud, slander, delusions roles, totally made up for themselves too, all along Route 175 from Old Weathersfield locations to Central Connecticut State University, the whole way through time. Increasingly, that's one of the things that connects people with the news too. WFSB attached me to fake conversations with themselves and with others, and sequence shifts. That was, in other words, when I caught them forcing a principal child abuser. They have more people with past child abusers and they had roles with it then, next to the WFSB, next to Fox Connecticut News, and next to WTNH, the same ones involved, including former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin. Next to WTNH is the FBI. Former standing chairperson on the Racketeering Influence Corrupt Organization Act. I'm not even a lawyer. Clearer than day, there's a Trantolo and Trantolo. The recorded confess demonstrate confirmed involved with change, making things up, changing and faking what people communicate, pretending people make conspiracy theories to hide their roles, with short communications. They have roles planting evidences with the news companies they've been and the intelligence next to them, where they've been putting ad placements, Trantolo and Trantolo. See them with an advertisement with themselves inside of a courtroom. They have courts involved with switching names and sequences with them, all kinds of natures of organized crimes and delusions. Black people, all along. These are also collusions / with names next to the Connecticut judicial branch offices and all along its conjunctions and things conjunctive to it, like all along Route 3 and Wethersfield Police and Wethersfield Pizza House have some predicate acts, wire crimes together, fake passions and emotions, planting evidences between campuses with child offenders, including medical, sexual, and these are people pretending they want privacy. That's why they won't get on paper. They're pretending the opposite at the same time too. We need to get them on paper into branch. But in other words, because there's a Dr. Shub who has a family involved with some courts, like including probate court judges, increasingly involved with predators at elderly homes and the child offenders at the same time. Ones on the medical campuses. A Leahy family. There are more pictures of a little girl in a Leahy family is further involved with, more foreign and domestic predators against kids, including ones with badges. Increasingly, people at Harvard Hospital's Institute of Living involved with the law with them too, and security. Again, too, with the businesses and the houses next to them. Increasingly involved predicate acts with the same house, with the police forging and switching names, falsifying police reports, and refusing to get onto paper one name and sequence. I'll never go down there and speak with them now. They already faked the conversation with me as an adult and as a kid. Now they're making the police department more and more guilty. They're making, they're incompetent, worse than criminally incompetent. But this is that country. This is locations, areas, and states at countries A through Z. Forgiveness is not to leave out the breaching method. And forgiveness is for you guys to not change and fake what I said, like about predicate acts with facts regarding the World Trade Center attack once. That was also recorded after the World Trade Center, but it was also recorded instantly and simultaneously recorded. Names that were at the World Trade Center had roles being demonstrated, associated with next spots next to and names next to and natures of conjunctions to the Fox Connecticut News people, WFSB people, and WTNH sources all along those from founding locations. They're people that are neighbors of I forgot their name, but they're involved with a whole bunch of people tied to a Delaware family with probate court judges, involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids, identity theft, fraud, slingers, also with fire department and their roles with other countries, including Russians and Ukraine, involved with their roles with identity theft, fraud, slingers. I never had a class with a domain, with a Delaware. These are people increasingly that with sexual circles, including with the family members of both sides of their intimate ties, were roles with probate court judges, with the same house /S involved planting illusions, fake ties, fake nature ties. They take a picture next to you and then pretend you know them. And there are people that don't know you at all, like a Joshua Julian, who's one of the ones with the Principal Child Defenders Facebook page, and Whiting Forensics with digital crimes with them, and Wethersfield Police Facebook page, New Britain Superior Court's Facebook page, after the World Trade Center attack, but these are the ones recorded involved with foreign and domestic military intercities before the World Trade Center attack, and with the courts and the FBI director and overt criminal enterprises, private ones, child offenders, people at the same time that asked me to have for help. And I tried to get them help. And then people I tried to get them help. I didn't want to go to the police on people, so I went to a psychiatrist. You know, and they brought up, all kinds of things. So I did the thing. People don't follow the rules. In other words, so they've been putting fake things in databases, including at medical, with the foreign and domestic military. They're using the right to lie where they don't have the right to lie. They've been all kinds of collusions, worse than criminal incompetence, while tactically delusions wrong, right through world wars, too, with psychiatry and the World Trade Center attack. Harper Hospital increasingly is recording capacity, demonstrating, confirmed. They want me to go more into details about them. They won't identify themselves legitimately and get me off the fake conversations and ties to the Leahy family and the Lombardo family. Increasingly involved planting fake things in databases, fake conversations with me. The Lombardo too, she tried to make you fake exception. Increasingly, these people are at Harper Hospital involved with various courts, judges, prosecutors, and their family members, directly, indirectly involved with people that planted evidence on my street with other countries at the same exact time. That's recorded. That's why we have to get them on paper. We need a Who Disbelieves Act. So the whole wire crime acts and methods that are self-valued, criminally foreign influence ones by the police departments involved. So they should fear God to pretend they have integrity. Ones involved with these Mendez police too. They better get me off the fake conversation with the older man. Never had a word of conversation with him. The older Mendez brother, as one of the ones too with the Phil Cololo. And they put confessions with different. They switch officer names and put different falsified police reports and put arrays of fake things in databases. They use and have used all natures of investigators in their campuses, in their homes, in the homes of their teachers, and next to them, use remotely criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions. Well, same ones next to parks, planting evidences, increasingly with the mayors from Weathersfield, people tied to them, people from my grammar school I never had a class with there. Increasingly, they're covering up lie progressions from people who put in predicate acts in databases at each of the schools. Whole predicate acts method rules /s.